Good evening, Washington Wizards. Good evening, Washington Wizards, and thank you for joining us tonight. We're having our principal chat broadcasted live, and we appreciate you taking the time to sit in with us for this really important conversation about how we create a safe and inclusive community at our school. Speaking of safety, I hope you made it through the hurricane safely. I know there's a lot of storm damage in the Raleigh area. We didn't have school today, but we are committed to a safe and inclusive community here at Washington, so we're going ahead with our broadcast. So thanks for tuning in if you have power. As a reminder, there is school tomorrow on Tuesday, and we report at our normal time. The bell opens up the building at 8:50. So hope everybody is safe, and thank you for joining us tonight. This is our second broadcast by live stream. We had one last spring, so there could be some technical glitches, and I'm sure you'll stick with us as we work through this format. I hope it allows you to participate at home, and if you're a viewer who's watching this a week or a month from now, it's going to be saved on our YouTube channel, so you can always watch it then. Obviously, if you're watching it not on October the 10th, if you email me, I will not be able to respond because I'm responding to live emails. So it's kind of a overview about what we're doing as a safe and inclusive community. You also have a chance to email in questions that you have during our conversation together. My email is bgrant@wcpss.net. That's bgrant@wcpss.net. You can also send us a tweet at GTWizards1, and we'll respond to those tweets on the air as well. Again, if you access this link through our Washington website, we have some of the information posted below the link that you use to access this live principal stream. So the PowerPoint that I'm referring to at several points tonight is on the website. It also has my email address and our Twitter account. Okay, so the first thing I want you to think about as we're talking about safe and inclusive communities here at Washington, I want you to take a look at this picture I'm going to show you on the screen. The picture that's going to come up in a minute has the heading of family. And it talks about what does a family look like? And how do you define a family? If you look at the screen and you think about this definition of a family, if you love each other, then you're a family. Take a moment to look at those photos. As you look through those photos, I wonder if you found yourself asking, am I in there? Do I see me? Do I see my family? And that's the kind of question our kids ask every day. They come to school and they look around the building and they say, do I see me here? At Washington, we want everybody to both see me, meaning me, my culture, my family, and we want people to be aware of and celebrate and learn about other people's cultures and families. Okay, I'm going to come back to me. The next picture you're going to see on the screen, and you also have a link for this on your website, is our Washington School Improvement Plan. We call it the SIP plan for School Improvement Plan. Our school improvement plan is a roadmap for how we get to our goal. And our end goal here is to raise achievement for all of our kids. All of our subgroup, every kid that walks in this building, we got 614 wonderful kids here this year. And our SIP plan says, how do we take action steps and get to the point where we have high achievement for all kids? And high achievement is not just about teaching and assessing. There's a lot of pieces that go into high achievement. I want to take a look for a second at our Washington Flight Plan. Now this flight plan is kind of our roadmap for how we get there. If you look at the top in green, it shows you that by 2018, Washington Elementary School will exceed growth as reported by EVOS, and on all subgroups will meet their annual measurable targets in reading and math. That's a lot of words, but it talks about, in essence, we want all kids to grow, and not just grow, but exceed a year's worth of growth here at Washington. And how do we go about doing that? Well, if you look at the three letters on top of the screen, F, L, and Y, We're going to fly together this year. That's right, we're taking flight together. When we take flight, we're focusing on F for focusing on instructional strategies. And under that is a list of things we're doing, from working on vocabulary development to using different types of formative assessments, to how teachers are visiting and walking through other people's classrooms to see the type of instruction that's happening. The data we're collecting to make sure we understand how kids are performing and how we can help keeping them growing. Now the L is talking about learning in a safe and inclusive environment. And that's really the key focus of tonight's discussion. What does a safe and inclusive community look like, and how do we get there? Now, if you look at some of the action steps, you're going to see it talks about the professional development that we're doing here at school, learning about people in our community. Family Digital Academy, which is a first this year at Washington, where families can come and learn 7 different sessions during the course of the year. They can learn about ways to support their child at home and partner with the school, and families actually have a chance to get a free desktop computer if they're participating in that program. And families received an invitation from school to partner with me in the Family Digital Academy. We're also thinking about adding resources to our literacy library and adding resources in our library to help promote cultural diversity. Lastly, we've got a group of staff and parents who are working together to figure out how do we create cultural diversity here at Washington, and how do we have culturally inclusive events. Our PTA is a big part of that. If you've been here at Washington for a couple of years, you may recall the really amazing festival, the Holy Festival that we had, and we learned all about Indian culture. And then last year we had a wonderful program that was helped planned by our Latino parents, learning about Latino culture. And we've got a plan for this year, which we'll share out at a later date, for celebrating our culture here at Washington. The last part about our plan is the why, and it's about yielding positive relationships and behaviors. Hopefully you're on Class Dojo, so you can have a strong communication link with your child's teacher. You can learn about what's happening here at Washington. And we're also working on helping to support students through proper interventions that we're providing in the classroom. But really tonight's focus is about learning in a safe and inclusive environment. So I want to spend some more time talking about that. So if we can come back off that screen. There's really 3 ways or 3 areas that we're focusing on at Washington to help develop a safe and inclusive community. Now the first one involves educating ourselves. How do we as staff members, how do we as parents, how do we as kids learn about the diversity that we have here at Washington? How do we go about celebrating that, and what resources do we have? Now, part of that starts with professional development for staff. Do you know that we have over 80 staff members here at Washington? That's from front office staff to over 27 classroom teachers and special education teachers and specialists, our drama teachers, our dance teachers, you name it. A huge group of adults that are working to support kids. But just like when you signed on tonight, you might be scratching your head and saying, I wonder what a safe and inclusive community is all about, and how do I go about doing that? Well, you know, teachers sometimes have some of those same questions. So to best equip our teachers and our staff here at Washington, we want to make sure that they have the resources to both share with kids about our safe and diverse community, and how do we hold conversations with kids when questions that come up and you're like, I'm not quite sure how to answer that. How do we answer that in a way that's respectful to all people, all kids, and informative about the different cultures that we have here at Washington? We also have an amazing counseling program that's led by Mrs. McDonough. She's our school counselor, and she'll be on in just a minute to tell you more about what our school counseling program looks like. Because we're talking about the first component, education. How do we learn about each other? And Mrs. McDonough does an amazing job teaching students and staff about both ways that we handle ourselves around character traits. How do we respond to when people are bullying? How do I communicate when I'm feeling sad or upset about something? Small groups that she works with about parents and families that might be going through divorce. And she'll tell us more about that in just the next few minutes. Lastly, as I pointed out, when you're talking about how we train and educate ourselves, it's about how do we hold conversations about what a safe and inclusive community looks like. And when you start talking about words like inclusion or community or diversity or culture, sometimes people feel a little bit awkward. and they don't say anything at all. But we don't do that at Washington. At Washington, we believe in the value of all people, and I believe strongly in the value of communication and the sharing of ideas. And that's one of the things that tonight's about, for you having a chance to learn about how we're a safe and inclusive community at Washington, and I want to hear from you as well. So don't be a silent participant, be grant@wcpss.net, or tweet us at GTWizard1 and let us know your thoughts. Now, a second component for having a safe and inclusive community is making sure that we have available resources here at Washington. Those resources can include books in our media center that I'll talk about a little bit later in our program. It's inviting in a theater group called Theater for Change that we're working with our 4th and 5th grade students through acting and through some great skits to help them reflect and think about, how do I be inclusive as a student? How do I have conversations around conflict for questions that I have? Theater for Change is a great group that helps to illustrate what that looks like for kids. And then lastly, I mentioned about the resources our PTA has in sponsoring these really amazing cultural events that we have that allow us to both experience the many vibrant cultures that we have here at Washington. The third component that we have here at Washington for a safe and inclusive community is a parent advisory and support group. So we have a parent advisory and support group for a safe and inclusive community. And I brought these parents together. We have around 12 to 15 different adults from many different grade levels and backgrounds that began working with me earlier this month and will be working together throughout the year, getting feedback from them, people who are in the school, people who are living the life of a busy parent, people who are working in parenting, and they're going to be sharing feedback, hopefully from you as you have a chance to talk with them, and to help us all be thinking about different diverse perspectives and what we need to do as adults to help support our kids. In fact, I've invited several of our members to be here on the program tonight from our parent advisory and support group, so I can't wait to hear more from them. Before we have a chance to talk about them, I'm going to ask Mrs. McDonough, who's our school counselor, to come on up, and she's going to talk a little bit about our counseling program here at Washington.
Thanks, Mr. Grant. Good evening, Washington Wizards. My name is Ms. McDonough, and I'm Washington's school counselor. No significant learning can occur without a significant relationship. Every day, I see teachers, staff, students, and parents engaging in significant relationships that promote a safe and inclusive school community here at Washington, and I'm really proud of that. In my role as Washington school counselor, I'm always thinking through the lens of supporting all students' academic, social, and emotional success. I collaborate with teachers, staff, administrators, and parents and community partners to implement a comprehensive school counseling program at Washington that again supports all students and helps to promote a safe and inclusive school community. At the beginning of each year, we teach students about our STAR expectations. Students learn how to show self-control, take responsibility, act safely, and respect themselves and others, and what that looks like at Washington. Additionally, each month, I visit classrooms, all classrooms, and teach lessons that incorporate the character trait of the month, as well as other skills like identifying feelings. So sometimes I feel we also really work on building the capacity for empathy. Empathy is kind of a big word for a kindergartner or first grader, but I bet by the end of this month, if you ask your students at home, what does empathy mean and how do you show it? They'll be able to give you a really thoughtful answer. We look at picture cards and we ask ourselves, I always cover up the bottom, how does this student feel? Do they look like a way that I felt in the past? Can I relate from my personal experiences about what it would feel like to be happy? To be lonely? To be sad? Or excited? And we have picture cards that demonstrate a number of feelings, a range of feelings that kids can relate from their own personal experience. And they really think, How do I know that that picture card shows a student who feels happy? What kinds of experiences can I relate from my life that helps me understand what it's like to walk in their shoes, what it's like to be them? That building capacity for empathy really helps students to peacefully solve problems and conflicts, and it also greatly reduces bullying at Washington. Another thing that helps reduce bullying and promotes safe and inclusive practices and behaviors here at Washington is our character traits of the month. October's character trait is respect, which happens to coincide with National Bullying Prevention Month. I think that it ties in really great, and students have talked a lot about how they would invite friends to join in, how they on the playground try to act safely and respectfully towards one another. We also have conversations with students about what similarities and differences we have, and a kindergarten teacher framed this really well for us. They said that in kindergarten, what they're saying with their students is, yeah, we do have a lot of differences. My hair might be brown, someone else's hair might be red, but we're more the same on the inside than we are different on the outside. At Washington, we also have counselor-led small groups that help provide targeted, more strategic support to students who need it. Small groups could include friendship or mindfulness strategies so that we can stay calm and focused and be successful academically. Additionally, I provide short-term, brief counseling to students and consult with teachers and staff and parents to promote students, again, all students, academic, personal, social, emotional success. On the website, there's going to be a link that you can access to learn more about how school counselors support students in Wake County. It says school counseling is for everyone, and I can't help stress that enough. So be sure to go on the website, check this out, and let me know if you have any questions or ways that you think we can improve the school counseling program at Washington. Thanks so much, Mr. Grant. Now back to you.
Thanks, Ms. McDonough. What an amazing resource she is. I just love seeing her in the classroom and working with our kids. She does a tremendous job supporting kids, supporting parents, and supporting teachers to have a safe and inclusive community here at Washington. Now, I want you to think for a minute about culture. What is culture? And how would you define culture? I want you to think for a minute. What is culture? Okay, now I want you to take a look at this definition of culture that we're going to bring up for you on the screen. I've got a couple of different definitions for you. One is for culture in general, and then another one is going to talk about school culture. Let's take a look at the first one, culture. Okay, so what is culture? Here's one definition of culture. It's from Cultural Proficiency, a manual for school leaders. It says culture includes all shared characteristics of human description, including age, gender, geography, ancestry, language, history, sexual orientation, faith, physical ability, as well as occupations and affiliations. Many people belong to several cultural groups. Here's another definition that talks about school culture, because each organization often has its own culture. Here's what Roland Barthes described when he was talking about school culture. He said, school culture is a complex pattern of norms, attitudes, beliefs, behaviors, values, ceremonies, traditions, and myths that are deeply ingrained in the very core of the organization. Listen to this. It's the historically transmitted pattern of meaning that wields astonishing power in shaping what people think and how they act. Again, every school has its own culture, and when our kids come into our building, what is the culture that they experience? That's really at the heart of our discussion. And do they feel like my culture, my background, is one that I can find here at Washington? And am I able to learn about other people's cultures and background. So I have a better understanding of the people that I'm working with here at Washington and that I'll be working with throughout my whole lifetime. Okay, I'm going to ask you I'm going to bring up in a second my parent representatives from our safe and inclusive community. They're going to come join me up here on our stage. I appreciate these parents taking their time to come in here after a busy day and after a kind of a wacky day with the school being out because of our hurricane that came through town recently. So thank you so much for coming and being here with us tonight. I'm just going to ask each of our representatives from our parent advisory and support team for a safe and inclusive community just to introduce themselves and tell us their child or children's name here at Washington.
My name is Kim Bush, and my son Griffin is in first grade here at Washington.
Hi, my name is Vishal Thomas. I've got two kids at Washington. Rihanna's in third grade, Rihanna Thomas, and my son Arik Thomas is in kindergarten.
Hello, my name is Nayamka Muse, and I have a daughter. We have a daughter here at Washington in fifth grade.
My name is Trevor Muse, and as my wife said, we have a daughter here at Washington in the fifth grade.
Great. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us tonight. I really appreciate it. And they are 4 members that are part of approximately 12 members of our Parent Advisory and Support Committee for a safe and inclusive school here at Washington. There's 3 different questions we're going to be thinking about, and I invite you as a viewer to reflect on these as well, and then also send in your thoughts. Again, you can email them to me at bgrant@wcpss.net, and then we'll be able to respond to your questions or thoughts right here during our program. And you can also send us a tweet at GTWizards1. So thanks so much for being an active participant today. The first question I want the viewers at home to be thinking about, as well as the parent members who are here with us today, is what does a safe and inclusive community at Washington look like to you? And I'm just going to give the opportunity for our different parents to respond. They might not all respond to each question, but we're just going to have a chance for them to chime in and share their thoughts. So does anybody want to start out talking about what a safe and inclusive community looks like to you?
Sure.
Great.
I will. Safe and inclusive community to me looks like an environment where all cultures feel welcome and accepted by parents, faculty, students, and staff.
And also to piggyback on how the student will feel, but also the diversity of the staff itself and the faculty, where the students can actually see some similarity between themselves and the faculty, and that makes them more open and feel more accepting in the culture at Washington.
That's a great point, Ms. Muse, and it's one of the things that we seek to do at Washington. I was having a conversation with a gentleman yesterday, and he was asking me about what does our school teaching staff look like, and what is the composition of different people from different backgrounds. And you know, it's one of the things that when you look at Washington, from the number of men who were on staff to people from different backgrounds, it's something that we strive to do, and we seek out people from diverse backgrounds, because as a child you learn from many different people and groups, one of those being from your teacher. Yes. Any other thoughts before I go to my next question? People at home, do you have any thoughts that you want to send us?
Just follow up with everything that was said, and then add that it's also important to communicate and talk about the diversity. So it's one thing to have it, but there needs to be intentional representation and conversations about the diversity in the school.
It's a great point, Dr. Bush. One of the things that we'll look at in a minute is some of the books that I have laid out, and we've been looking to grow our school resources that we have to be learning about all the different groups that we have here at Washington. And you know, we can take those books and we can stick them in a shelf and then hope that some child randomly comes across the book and reads about another culture or person from a different background. Or we can attempt to have more purposeful conversations, just like we're having tonight. And I think that's really crucial, and why I seek your feedback and why I started this parent advisory and support group, because it's not a one-way conversation. It's not about us preaching or talking to you. It's about all of us having a chance to ask questions, share out, and learn about each other in a healthy way. A second question I'd like you to reflect on is, at Washington, we're not looking to push certain beliefs. We're looking to create awareness and appreciation of different perspectives and cultures. When we as a school are working with staff and students to create an awareness of different cultures and family compositions, what questions come to mind when thinking about this work? So we're engaging in this work together, and I outlined for you things that we're doing, everything from our counseling program to the Theater for Change group that we're having here come to Washington, the cultural events, the books that we're having in our media center, the conversations we'll be having with each other. But do you, who are home viewers, have questions when you think about, when Mr. Grant talks about these kind of things, what does that look like? Or when I think about that happening, I sort of wonder about blank. And I don't know if any of our parents here have any thoughts about what questions come to mind when you think about us doing this work.
I can give that a shot. I mean, to me, I think it's wonderful that we have the diversity we do, but it's also the challenge, right? I mean, we have people from so many different religious backgrounds, different races, and different, family compositions that I wonder whether, we have the resources for, staff, for, administration to be able to, role model those behaviors in a real meaningful way. And that, it would be a challenge for anyone, but in a school with this kind of diversity, are the resources in place, training in place to be able to do that in a very meaningful way, consistently. Yeah.
You're right. I think and thank you, Vishal, for raising that point, which is, again, how do we have conversations? How do we teach our kids? And how do we go about doing it in a way that's effective? And that's through staff training. It's also through purposeful work with our groups like Theater for Change, who will work with our 4th and 5th graders, which is helping them to create scenarios that the actors act out for the kids and then role play some different situations to give them some real experience with, when I come across blank, how do I respond and deal with that? Or if I come across a student in my class who's talking about a student in a certain way, what are the words or ways that I address that that's both respectful to the person who you disagree with or don't feel is being safe and appropriate? But we all need the tools to do that. And that's something that we're going to actively be doing and helping our teaching staff do as well. And we have a question from one of our online viewers. Ms. McDonough, do you want to read that out loud to us?
Mr. Grant and parents, I believe that you all have spoken to this in your comments, but there's a question from Sarah Bliss that says, how might you engage the school community this week about last night's presidential debate, specifically the type of communication Trump used?
So, when we're talking about politics in school, in the classroom, again, when we talk about how do we share out our beliefs, to me, it's not about, when you're talking about something like the presidential election, it's about talking about that process. It's making students aware of what the democratic process looks like. It's not about advocating for any certain candidate, but I think that it's about how do we hold respectful conversations. One of the questions that was asked last night that I think was a meaningful one was the last one of the debate, when a person says, what respectful thing can you say about the other person? And they had to dig a little deep, each candidate, to do that. But it's about how can we be respectful? And I think in a debate like that, when you have people sharing out their ideas, it's helping students to see the way that we're going to really make a difference is about focusing on issues. Now, we can all have different ideas about how to get to an end point, but can we discuss that and share that in a meaningful way? When we think about the 4 C's here in Wake County and in Washington, the 4 C's have to do with creativity, communication, collaboration, and critical thinking. And I think the critical thinking and communication go hand in hand when you think about how do we hold crucial conversations, how do we talk about important conversations, and do it in a way that's informed and has some real evidence to back up what we're thinking about. And in fact, that's a skill that we teach our kids here at Washington. And I know that Mrs. McDonough, who's here with us tonight, teaches an elective called Lessons in Leadership. And Lessons in Leadership often invites people from our community who are leaders in different capacities to talk about both their own background, but also what are the skills necessary, just like the one that we're using right now, which is a communication skill and trying to articulate our ideas. So I think that's how we want to frame it. And I think we want to frame it also, getting back to the viewer's question about the presidential debates. It's how do we have respectful conversations with each other and meaningful conversations, right? The third question I'd like the viewers to reflect on, as well as our parent and advisory and support group: what are conceptions or beliefs others may have, either positive or negative, about a group that you belong to? And how do you think we can best learn about each other? So we're reflecting about, we belong to many different cultural groups, and if you go back to that long definition talking about what culture is, you may have found yourself really belonging to many different groups within that broad definition of culture. So again, when we think about beliefs or conceptions that others may have, positive or negative, about a group that we belong to, what might those be? And then secondly, how can we best learn from each other? Does any of the parent members want to respond?
I'll start with this one.
Sure.
I think one thing, Griffin has 2 moms, and I think that's one stereotypical person. One thing that would come to mind is that his family is wrong. And I think the fine line is finding the balance between his family is different. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's wrong. And it may be people might not believe that that is correct, but having respect for the different family dynamic, I think, is important, and having discussions about how all families are different, and we might not agree. Our family might not believe that that's correct, or it might be against our religion, and that's fine, but we don't have to be disrespectful to Griffin.
Right. That's a great point. And it kind of comes back to what we started with at the beginning part of this conversation, which is if you love each other, then you're a family. So even if people come across something and they say, that's different than my own experiences, different doesn't necessarily mean wrong, but how do you have a conversation with a child about anything that they perceive of as different? I know one time when I was younger and there's a person who looked different, and as a kid I spent a lot of time staring at them. It's because you're curious because the person looks different than you. And that can happen through family customs. You go to someone's house and the inside of the house, it smells different because some of the things they're cooking with, you don't recognize those smells or those foods that you have, or the way that people dress, and there's a whole range of things. But when we talk about differences, it's about understanding that and then learning about that background. That's right.
I just want to share, when Rihanna was in first grade, she came home one day and she was like, Dad, why do we eat meat? We shouldn't be eating meat. And my friends told me that, I'm Indian, I shouldn't be eating meat, which is really interesting because, my wife and I are of Indian origin, but, we don't have any religious restrictions, and I've always eaten everything I've found. So that's a conversation we have to have, with Rihanna, that yes, we are of Indian origin, but that doesn't mean that you're vegetarian necessarily. There's a choice that we make. And that's, goes back to a conception and a belief that people have. And you just, through conversation, you need to kind of raise awareness, broaden horizons, but not just for the child, but then in turn, the community around her. Yeah. So yeah.
There's a couple words that come to mind. It's just steering away from stereotypes. Social norms is one thing, but stereotypes is a different. It brings different results to conversation and activities among students and even adults. So if we can continue to look through the person and have unconditional love for one another, then I believe that we will create that inclusive community with everyone.
What a great point, talking about this, the love that we need to have as people. And I see that every day when I think about our staff and how they welcome our kids in the building and kids feel valued and supported, which is really at the root of what we're talking about. Do I feel valued? Do I feel loved? Do I feel supported? The other thing that comes to mind when you're talking about stereotypes, I think we sometimes paint with a broad brush. So just because you're African American or Mr. Thomas is of Indian descent, it doesn't mean that just like Rihanna was talking about in my family, like what do we do as a family, and do we eat meat or do we not eat meat, or what does that mean? And you might have a bigger umbrella that you're part of. It could be the certain cultural group, but then within that, there's many differences. And there's often discoveries that we have as members of our own cultural group where we think differently than other people who are from that same group. So it's not just one big group think, but there's many different people, and that really inherently comes back to valuing and supporting everybody in their belief systems. Any closing thoughts from anybody online?
Yes. Is there a way for parents and students in our school community to share if they are interested in sharing more about their culture?
Well, what a great question. So again, the viewer asked, is there a way for a parent or a member of our community to share more about their culture? So yes, and absolutely, we welcome you. So one great person you can share with is me, your principal, B. Grant at WCPSS.net. We love when families have the opportunity to come in and talk about their cultures and customs. I had a student last year who shared a suite with me in the school hallway and said, Mr. Grant, I want you to have this. And I said, oh, wow, what's this for? And he said, well, my family is celebrating Eid. And that's EID, which is a Muslim holiday. And he told me more about it, and I had a chance to learn about it, and then invited his family in to talk more with his class to learn about their family's background. So we love the opportunity for families to come in, share about yourselves. You can talk with your own child's classroom or others' classrooms to help us have a broader sense of families and their backgrounds. And we have, I think, two more questions. Wonderful. Thank you, viewers.
Related to your last point, how can interested parents or family members become more involved or maybe even part of the Safe and Inclusive Parent Advising Group?
Wow. So we welcome you. Again, we have around 12 or so parents that are part of that group. And if you're a person that would be interested in being part of that group and group discussions, then please email me again at bgrant@wcpss.net. That's one way that you can participate. You can send a note in with your child. And that's the committees. Right now, we're planning on meeting 3 times a year. We just had our first meeting a few weeks ago, and we'll meet again before the winter break. And then we'll have a meeting in the spring. So we'd love to have you come on board and do that. And even if that's not something that you're able to do, I love sitting down and have conversations with you. And what we need to think about is our members of the Parent Advisory and Support Group, whether we have a way for you to contact or reach out to them. And because sometimes I want to have this conversation with another parent. I've got something that I'm kind of going through my brain, and I want to have a chance to talk that through with someone. That might be a great way. So maybe this team can help me think through what's a way that we can have people reach out to our Parent Advisory Committee and use that as kind of a forum for discussion.
Lastly, Mr. Grant and parents, a parent writes, we have read the documentation about bullying policy, but would like to hear more on that subject.
Great. So the topic of bullying is an important one, and bullying exists throughout schools in Wake County and across our nation. And that comes about from people, kids, coming together, and people bully for a whole range of reasons. And the key thing is to acknowledge that bullying happens, but what do we as a school community do to really limit, decrease that, hold kids accountable, and most importantly, teach them skills that they can most effectively both communicate their own feelings and be advocates for themselves. So really the issue of bullying is at the heart of what we're talking about tonight, because I think that when we think about bullying, and that can be verbal and that can also be physical, that comes about through a variety of reasons that why people bully. One of the reasons is not understanding or not valuing other people or ways of being or acting. And so we either act out against what we don't understand or what we don't like or whatever that is. And it's about increasing that sense of understanding and valuing that I think you really limit the climate where that type of behavior is accepted. It's when we have a culture that puts up walls, talks about us versus them, and people begin to adopt beliefs about who has worth, who does not have worth, that I think is grounds for bullying. The other piece is equipping kids with tools to be able to respond to someone. So Mrs. McDonough, who briefly talked about her counseling program, is a really important part of that. And that's about how do I, as a child, both recognize the inappropriate behaviors? How do I stand up for myself or other people when I see those behaviors in a safe way? What are steps that I can take to both advocate for me and say, I don't like that. Stop, don't put your hands on me, that's not okay. And if that's not helping, how do I go and work with an adult, someone like your teacher or administrator like myself or Mrs. Sykes or Mrs. Burnett, our admin intern? Those are all steps that we take, but key is education and equipping kids with those tools. Okay. Ms. McDonough, do we have any other online questions?
You have answered all online questions.
Great. Any closing thoughts from any of our family team members?
I think this is a great forum. I think this solidifies what Washington stands for. And I'm excited about what's going to happen here at Washington. It's already starting, and all the parents keep coming in and joining.
Absolutely. And I'm going to wrap up with a brief book tour. So Mrs. Tuttle, our technology assistant, is going to follow me as I make my way over to some stacks of books. And we just pulled some of the books. We've got hundreds of books here at Washington that help us learn about and celebrate the diverse groups of people that we have. I'm going to do a very brief tour, but I encourage you to come into our media center and to our classrooms, because these books are not going to sit idly on a shelf waiting to be discovered. These books are about us and how wonderful we are as a school community. So these books could be available for student checkout in the media center. These books can also be available for teachers to use when they're teaching lessons about families or communities or about holidays or different cultures. So these books could be used for a read aloud by a teacher. These are books that could be part of student books that they use when they have a read to self or read to a partner during their literacy block time. But again, I'm just going to highlight some, but I really encourage you to come in and see the materials that we have that are available. So we have a number of books. I had mentioned Eid, and this book is talking about Eid and Ramadan, and talking about some of the customs we have from our Muslim families. Here's one that's celebrating the Holy Festival. We had a wonderful celebration here. In fact, I had my face marked up with some colors like this by some of our students at our Holy Festival 2 years ago. We have books that talk about many different people from Asian backgrounds, and this one's talking about Japanese celebrations and Uncle Peter's amazing Chinese wedding. You know, some books are simply books that might have a Muslim character who could be a detective, but he just happens to be Muslim. And then some books are specifically teaching you about that geography or about that culture and background. Here's some great books that are teaching us about diverse families. Here's one, In Our Mother's House, and it's talking about a family that has two moms. Here's another one that's called The Great Big Book of Families, and The Great Big Book of Families talks about the many different family makeups that you have, and as a child you might find yourself part of that. Just like we looked at those pictures at the beginning of our time together, we looked at pictures of families and we thought, am I in there? Do I see myself? Here's some that talk about segregation and slavery, and separate is never equal. And this is one that I read recently. Mrs. Terashima, who's our media specialist, had ordered some over the summer. I enjoyed reading it. I didn't really fully know about the history of segregation. This was taking place in California, and how Latino families were segregated, not allowed to go to the same schools as white children. One of our viewers asked about bullying, and I know this is kind of backwards when you see in the video camera, but this one says, Confessions of a Former Bully, and it's written from a student's perspective who is a bully, and it talks about maybe why they bullied and then sort of the realizations they had about being a person who's not a bully. Here's some that talk about students that might have some differences all students are special and specially able. This one says, my friend has autism. We got many students here at Washington who have autism, and there's a chance to learn about and read about students with autism. Here's some from African American background. So again, different stories. It may just have, this is a New York Times bestselling author and called Hold Fast. And this is really just a suspenseful book, exciting novel to read. And it's really just has some African American characters in it. And then here's some with our Hispanic families. This one says, I am Latino, and it's learning about Latino families. Here's one talking about Day of the Dead. Great celebration, a lot of fun. And then here's some books that we have that are teaching us about Hanukkah, celebrating Hanukkah, or celebrating Rosh Hashanah, or how do dinosaurs say Happy Hanukkah. So we invite you to come and take a look at many of these wonderful resources we have. We have so many great stories to read and to learn about, and I'm sure that you have great stories to tell. So thank you again for coming and joining us tonight, and I invite you to come and share with me your thoughts and ideas about how we can create a safe and inclusive community at Washington. You can do that by just coming into the office and asking to talk with me. If I'm not in a classroom, you know I would love to talk to you, or you can set up an appointment with me to be sure that I'm available. Thank you so much. Have a great evening, and remember, we've got school tomorrow on October the 11th. Have a great night.